Shabbat Shalom. Again, it's our pleasure to have you with us at Manna from Heaven Ministries. You're listening to Manna Live. And it is a delight to have you in the congregation so that we can share with you what Father's been revealing to us. As we were just talking to the group that's assembled here tonight, it is so powerful, the things that Father is revealing. It's as if we were looking at it yesterday and we saw certain things, and then we come back this afternoon and my goodness, there it is again. We'll look tomorrow and you see something different. His word is literally impregnated with his presence, and it's birthing on a constant basis. And every time I look at the Torah portion, it just staggers me at what he's revealing. This Torah portion is entitled Behar, and if you were to render it into King James English, it would be defined as in or on the mountain. And it's taken from Leviticus chapter 25, verse 1 through chapter 26, verse 2. It's basically just one chapter. And if you start looking at how many verses are in this one chapter, it doesn't really look like there could be too much stacked in there. And if you've done over the course of your life in the kingdom that like we have, you'll take it for granted and you'll just skim over the top and you'll miss some of the things that Father's trying to reveal to you. It just so happens that in the book of Leviticus, also known as Vayikra, which means and he called, that should make you just stop right there, because whenever you read this book, he's speaking to you as an individual. Did you know that the Tanakh, the Torah, the writings, the prophets, the Brit Hadashah, did you know that it's a personal epistle, a personal covenant that's been written specifically to you, that it will really give you insight about who you are as an individual and who he is as far as your relationship with him? And when you start looking at this word Vayikra, he's telling you, and he called, and he hasn't quit calling. We just need to be able to hear him so that when he does call, we can assemble at the proper time. Well, this Torah portion happens to be the 9th in this book, Vayikra. And as we looked last evening, it's not an accident that he stuck the number 9 in here. And we found in our past teachings that whenever you see the Hebrew numbers, they have an equivalent representative in the Hebrew Aleph Bet. Well, the number 9 and the Hebrew letter Tet are the equivalent of one another. And I found as I began to just examine that Hebrew letter Tet and the number 9, that everything that Father has said from Genesis to Revelation, listen to me, you may think that I've just went off the deep end when I say this. But everything from Genesis to the book of maps, which is behind Revelation, is summed up in this one Hebrew letter, the Tet. He will tell you about the redemption plan, why you needed to be redeemed, what you did that caused you to need redemption, who else was involved in the compromise of your relationship with him to cause you to need redemption. He'll show you who restored you back to the right relationship with him. He's also going to show you that by times that there were incidences where the very same thing, this same pattern, the method of operation that we had from Genesis forward was reenacted time after time after time. And in this one Hebrew letter Tet, he's going to show you in the future it's going to happen again to follow that same pattern. You know, I would think that we would quit being so stupid, because Father's put a blueprint in front of us and given us instructions. And really, we are without excuse. There's absolutely no reason that we should fail this time. Are you with me? Well, that Hebrew letter Tet is a paradox in itself, because if you look at it, it can represent both good and evil. Good in that it looks like a womb, and evil in that it looks like a serpent with its tail raised up. And as I said earlier, this particular Torah portion, Behar, in the mountain or on the mountain, takes place at a specific location you should be familiar with, and of course it is known as Mount Sinai. And what I shared with you that I want to make sure that I cover again tonight, just as surely as the children of Israel were brought here to Mount Sinai and given the words of the Torah, there have been many false encounters. There's going to be another occasion in the days in front of us where there will be a false mountain. As a matter of fact, Constantine's mom, Helena, or Helena, depending on how you want to pronounce it, says that Mount Sinai is in Egypt on the Sinai Peninsula. a false mountain. And there are a lot of individuals that will argue with you right now, just as surely as we're standing here, to tell you that that is the mountain that Yahweh met with the children of Israel and gave them the wedding contract. Well, this false mountain is going to have a false assembly gathering on it in the coming days, because they're going to think that he's calling, and it will be the voice of another. That's why John chapter 10 tells you, the sheep know his voice. Are you hearing me? The sheep know the voice of the Father. They recognize the voice of the Father, and another they will not follow. Now, we want to be condemnatory by times when we hear that, and we want to point fingers of accusation. So, my goodness, they're hearing the wrong voice. But to be honest with you, you and I have heard wrong before in the past, and we have been prone to following the false leading of a voice from another shepherd. Are you with me? Well, this Hebrew letter tet will give you some insight about what is about to happen. As I said, if you look at it, it's the way it's inverted. It looks like a womb that's about to give birth. And it also looks like a serpent with its tail raised up. And of course, as soon as you see that, the reason that I tried to connect you to Genesis chapter 3 is so that you'll remember whenever you study a particular subject, you remember the law of first reference. Well, the first reference of the serpent would be back in Genesis chapter 3. So there should be some sort of connection tonight in this Torah portion, Behar, the 9th Torah portion, and the Hebrew letter tet. There should be some sort of connection to the serpent. Well, as we found, we began to look in Genesis chapter 3, and of course you remember chapter 3. It's where Adam and Eve were in Gan Eden, and if you will go back and study, we don't have time to go into it tonight, but it was during a divine appointment, a holy convocation. And you know that during those holy convocations, they were designed from Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 forward, so that Father could meet with his bride for the sheer purpose of being intimate with her. Well, someone else shows up at this divine appointment, and Adam and Eve have an encounter with this individual at this location called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and we've studied it before. It literally could be interpreted as the tree of carnal knowledge. And we know that at this particular juncture in time, they were given a choice. Since they were the bride, they were given the choice of whose seed they would receive and produce. Remember Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 through 28, when Yahweh said, listen, Adam, Eve, you're to be fruitful, multiply, replenish, subdue, and have dominion. Well, not only were they as a husband and wife to be fruitful and multiply and replenish, but they were also to be repositories so that they could receive the word of Yah and in turn replenish the earth with the divine seed of Yah. Can you follow me? Well, here they are in Genesis chapter 3, about to be confronted by this false shepherd, this serpent, also known as the Nakash, the shining one. And again, if you'll remember, this Torah portion, the tet, the 9th Torah portion, has a connection here. You'll miss this if you're not able to look at it in the Hebrew language. Well, they had the choice to decide if they were going to receive the serpent's seed or the seed of Yah. Now, as we began to look at it, we saw that Hebrew letter tet even had an occurrence before the Genesis chapter 3 example. And we saw that in Genesis chapter 1, verse 4, where Yahweh divides the light from the darkness. Remember the verse? And he saw that it was good. That's the first occurrence in that sentence where you see the Hebrew letter tet. Now, it's interesting because now you see a connection with this tet, the serpent, and the division of light and darkness. Well, fast forward just 2 chapters to chapter 3, and what do you have? You have an encounter with the seed of the serpent, which will breed darkness, and the seed of Yah, which brings light. So Yahweh makes a distinction, if you will, between light and darkness. Go back to chapter 2 of Genesis, and he plants the trees in the garden, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There's your light and there's your darkness. It's again a figure, if you will, of what took place in chapter 1, verse 4. And we found that as we began to delve into it, Isaiah chapter 14, we'll look at that in a few minutes, that there was another occasion even prior to Genesis chapter 1 when light and darkness was distinguished between the two, and another encounter on the mountain took place. Well, we're going to look at that in a few moments. while we are, I'd like to focus on Genesis chapter 1, verse 4, where Yah says that he would divide the light from the darkness. Well, it's interesting, and I shared this with you last night. If you look at the numeric value of those two words in Hebrew, light is or, darkness is choshek. It has that guttural kit at the front of it. Well, what he's trying to show you, not only with these words in Hebrew, but their numeric value, if you will take the greater number and subtract the lesser number from it, it gives you an interesting spin to what we're looking at with the Hebrew letter tet. Are y'all getting any of this? Okay. Well, let's look at the Hebrew word for light first. Strong's number 216, and it's rendered or, aleph, vav, resh. If you take the individual numeric values, it tallies up to 207. Resh is 200, vav is 6, aleph is 1. It just so happens, this is not an accident, that the numerical value of light, 207, is the same as the gematria of the title of this Torah portion, Behar. So now you know that the word Behar, in the mountain, also means light in the mountain. You remember when Yahweh descended on top of the mountain and the children of Israel looked at it and said, my goodness, it's on fire. Which is the way we'd say it down here in South Mississippi. Are you hearing? Now, the word for darkness is the word koshek, Strong's number 2822. It's written with a ket, sheen, and a kaf. Ket is 8, sheen 300, kaf is 20. It tallies 328. Remember I said subtract the lesser from the greater? If you subtract 207 from 328, if you subtract the light from the darkness, listen to me, you come up with the number 121. And people will say this, the gematria, the numerical values, their studies, it really has no merit. But I've got news for you. His ways are far higher than your ways. His thoughts higher than yours. And he will teach you something, even in these numbers, that you will never see in the King James English. As a matter of fact, you could just leave the Hebrew letters and words alone and study the numerical value of the numbers that's associated with the letters and glean far more than you can from just the King James English. Amen. Well, the number 121 is the equivalent to the Hebrew word, Strong's number 680, azal. The word azal means to reserve, to hold back, to take part of. Well, as soon as I saw that word, and I've looked at some of these enough that a lot of times when I'm studying, it's like, boom, the GTE bulb goes off above your head. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Well, when I saw that word azal, I was reminded of the scapegoat, Azazel, which that word azal, literally means the scapegoat or the one reserved, the one held back for Yah. It was known also as the goat of removal. And, of course, it's associated with the Day of Atonement. And I ask you a question here, then, do you think there's a connection to this Torah portion, Behar, the ninth Torah portion, and the tet, the serpent, light, being separated from darkness? Do you think that maybe there's now a connection to the Day of Atonement, that scapegoat, and the goat for Yah? Well, of course, the theme of the Day of Atonement was separating light from darkness. And so, what you begin to see as you delve into this, and if you're one of those that's real timid and you want to kind of tiptoe in, well, that's all you're going to get. You'll get just your feet wet. But if you're one of those that's like Ezekiel says, you can wade on out past the thigh and past the chest to its neck deep in waters to swim in. This is what the Torah will do for you. Amen? When you get in waters that are so deep and swift that you can't touch the bottom anymore, you can't depend on your flesh and what you've been accustomed to, and you solely depend on the Spirit of Yah to move you like the current of the water you've just went in, you'll find that you've just went into a different realm altogether in your personal relationship with Him. If you want it, here it is. Come and get it. Sounds like a song could be made out of that, doesn't it? Let's look at that word Behar, the title of the Torah portion. Let's look at it for a second. If you break it apart, now the reason I do this is because we're told, the Brit Kadashah tells you, study to show yourself approved unto Yah, workmen that need not to be ashamed. And how can you keep from being ashamed? By rightly dividing the word of truth. Well, that word divide means to dissect it and take it apart. Well, that's what we're doing here at Manna from Heaven Ministries. We're dissecting these words.